Welcome, welcome. This is episode 4. It's easy to keep count at this point because we're only a few episodes in, but at some point I'm going to forget which episode it is when I announce that at the start.
Do you reckon?
No, I'll keep track every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
no.
A little tally if that's a genuine problem.
Oh no. In fact, the title of this recording in Riverside said episode 3 and 4, so there's almost no chance of that happening, but yeah, welcome. Thanks for coming back. Or this might be your first one. And if it is, me and James, we chat, every week? Can't even remember when we said we'd do this now, but we sit down and we record a couple of episodes every now and then. But we talk about email marketing. We try and give you actionable advice. We try and give you some insights. We run an email marketing agency and we work with a bunch of clients on running newsletters. We do some D2C work as well. So we've got some stuff to say, and basically we wanted to use this podcast to share some of the information that we've come across, some of the findings that we've come to through the work that we've done.
And definitely not to generate leads, right, Jamie?
Definitely
just here to give value.
Yeah, vibes and value. We should have just called it that, not send better emails, but
yeah, vibes and
value. Yeah, that's why we're here. So what do you want to talk about this time?
So we're going to talk about send frequency, which, interestingly, is one of the most commonly asked questions that I receive from our clients.
Yeah, it's that or what's a good open rate?
Yeah.
Are the two most common ones I get. Or how do I grow my list? Or how do I get subscribers?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Well, you've ruined it then.
Sorry.
You've just...
But it's in the top 3.
Here are 10 other questions that I get asked more regularly.
According to ChatGPT, this is the most asked question. How often should I send my newsletter? That's like a big one, right? And I think people ask that question because it's like, you know what I'm like for my metaphors, but when people ask that question, it's almost like asking your personal trainer, how many sets have I got left? It's kind of like, well, how often do I have to send it? As opposed to how often should I? Does that make sense? Because people find it quite high effort to generate newsletter content.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of putting it. I like the personal trainer.
Metaphor. Stay tuned for more metaphors because you're going to drown in them.
Oh God, and there's going to be more gym related ones as well. You can tell that Jamie's been to the gym this morning for the first time in a while because
we won't stop talking about it.
It's top of mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm not vegetarian anymore or vegan when I used to be. Otherwise, all of my metaphors would have been vegan metaphors.
I remember your vegan phase.
Yeah, that would have been even more insufferable.
Yeah, you'd be like, just think of a murderer eating a burger.
Yeah.
And then...
Maybe we could make all of our metaphors kind of beard related because people latch onto that about us.
We definitely, when we started the agency, we wanted to be the email guys, the newsletter guys, and we're the beard guys.
We ended up being the beard guys and people forget what we actually do.
Yeah. We haven't successfully. This is partly why we're doing this podcast because it's an audio format as well. So there will be some people out there who hopefully don't know what we look like, but have heard our views on emails. And those people might call us the email guys.
They might do. Although I think the thumbnail will have our avatars on that have beards. Sorry. Maybe we should just start selling beard products instead.
That would be an interesting pivot.
It would.
Think of how good the email marketing would be, though, for that brand.
It would, and people know us for beards already. Maybe we can re-release the Gillette song.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Do our own take.
Be to beard.
Oh, okay.
That.
Yeah. I mean, this was funny, and then you've done that. So, all right, let's go back to send frequency.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the obvious question here is how often should I send my newsletter? So let's just first explicitly say we're talking about B2B newsletters for this. What do you think? What's the minimum?
Imagine if we were just like, it's exactly 9 days. Every 9 days you'd send it, and that was just the end of the podcast.
I mean, there probably is a stat that exists that says you should send it every, I don't know, every 360 hours.
Well, Jamie, that stat would be wrong. At least it would be wrong for some people. And it won't surprise you to hear that my answer to your question is it strongly depends on a number of variables.
Don't do this to us. Don't just say it depends.
I'm like an MP, but for email marketing. No, it does depend. What I would say is this: I would say no more frequent than once a week, and no less frequent than once a month.
Okay.
If you're going to push me for something, objective, I would say that's quite a nice zone to be operating in, between weekly and monthly. And I would say monthly is fine, weekly is fine. Anything outside of that window could be too frequent or too infrequent.
Okay, I like that. I think I will dispute that slightly.
Go on.
I think if you're launching a newsletter, that monthly is great, and is the minimum. And I think monthly is minimum for anyone. I do think that there is space when you have an engaged enough list to send more frequently than weekly. But that will be such a small percentage of the people listening to this podcast, and such a small percentage of the people that should be sending newsletters.
Yeah.
I think you can build this audience, and the proposition for your newsletter could be strong enough that sending more frequently than weekly would be a good idea.
Yes. There's definitely a world in which that could be a possibility. I think the big things that hinge on that is the size of your list and your ability to potentially email some members of that list and not others, and also how interesting your content actually is, right? Because I think setting out to send something more regularly than every week puts onus on the person sending them to make them all interesting and worth sending. And if you get more frequent than once a week, that becomes quite a tall order for a B2B. So, yeah, but you're absolutely right.
And Lord knows enough of these businesses struggle to even get one out monthly, right? So we need to set our expectations in a good place. I think, our newsletter is weekly.
Yeah.
And there's a reason why it's weekly. I guess, if we're talking about segmenting our audience, then maybe you're sending more emails per week, per month than you would be if you hadn't segmented your audience, because you're tailoring the content.
Yeah.
So do you think it's send frequency, or it's receipt frequency? How often are people receiving emails and not how often are we sending them?
You love that, don't you?
You're
trying to play it cool.
Yeah, no.
That was really nice.
Oh, thanks, mate.
Yeah, I really like that, because then we're thinking about the reader.
Yeah.
And we should always be trying to think of the recipient. Okay, what's the experience like for the person that signed up to my newsletter? If they're receiving emails all the time, then their experience might not be that good. If you're using their email address wisely, then you can create a great experience. You might be sending 10 emails a month, but maybe that recipient's only getting 2 of them, the ones that are most relevant to them.
Yeah. I wish we'd have talked about this before we started recording this podcast, because now we have to think about it with a different frame about receipt frequency as opposed to send frequency. But you and I are good at kind of weaving bullshit and talking our way out of situations, so we'll be good. Okay, so monthly minimum, weekly kind of good sweet spot. More frequently if you've been doing it for some time and you've got a good audience that's engaged. Should you tell people how often you're going to send your emails?
Yes. Yeah, I think it's really nice to set expectations at the point that someone's signing up. So when we write a value proposition for a newsletter on behalf of a client or for our own newsletters, we would probably mention the amount of emails that they're going to receive. And I think that's good, because for a lot of prospective subscribers, there is a lot of inbuilt cynicism when it comes to entering your email into a box and hitting a button. People are worried that they're going to be spammed, that they're going to receive emails every day, that they're going to be bombarded. And so saying we send you a weekly hit of e-commerce tips or a monthly dose of SEO wisdom or whatever it might be, is a nice way of managing those expectations and sort of saying, no, we're this is what you're going to get, this is what we're going to stick to, and we're not going to abuse the fact that you've put your trust in us.
Nice. Yeah.
But do you think, Jamie, is there a danger in sort of publicly committing in that way? Again, let's go back to the gym. I don't necessarily want to tell the whole of Norwich that I'm going to start going to the gym every week in 2025, because what if I don't?
Because it would be a blatant fucking lie. That's why. No, you're right. And there's this embarrassment. And I think that is dangerous. But in reality, if you miss a week, no one really cares. I think, making sure that we commit to the frequency that we promised isn't as important as you might think, right? I mean, who's missing out from you skipping a week? Really?
Oh, but think of all that value that you give every week that people look forward to. No, I completely agree.
Yeah, and sometimes you just don't have anything to offer that week, and that's kind of all right. And I've played around with the idea of, if I can't get a newsletter out, and this might be a terrible idea, but we're always about creative and innovative solutions when it comes to email marketing here. So I've played around with the idea of thinking, I just can't get a newsletter out this week because I haven't got the brain space to dedicate to getting one out. So why don't I just send one and say that, and maybe point them to something else helpful that's really low effort for me to get, and then say, you know what, see you next time, kind of thing. And whether that kind of refreshing honesty and authenticity is a good thing, or whether it's just like, Jamie, get over yourself. Like, if you haven't got anything valuable to say, then just don't bother sending one. Like, no one's going to care.
No, I really like that. I think that's a cool idea. I like that, breaking the fourth wall. So as an aside, definitely do that one week. Because there's probably a lesson to be given about what happens when you're in that situation. Because obviously we're quite lucky in that we can get away with that, because the topic we're emailing about is email marketing and writing newsletters. But a lot of people listening won't have that privilege. They can't break the fourth wall in that regard when it comes to sending a newsletter. So offering some advice about, okay, what do you do if you're in that situation, would be valuable. I think there is one of my favorite things to tell people is how little people give a shit about their emails. And I think that is a really important message for this podcast. And it's not to denigrate the value that you're giving. You could be writing the most interesting, value-rich newsletters every week and sending them out to a super dedicated audience that have opted in and who you've met in person. And even then, if you miss a week, nobody's going to notice. And even if they do notice, they're going to be forgiving and it's going to be fine. Nobody is going to send an angry email saying, where's my newsletter this week? It's just not going to happen. It's not the way people behave.
Imagine how good your newsletter would be for someone to have to send an angry email saying, where's the newsletter this week?
It would honestly be the dream to be in that sort of situation.
Yeah, for sure. So I think if we're talking about missing a week then, and I now have a really tidy excuse to miss a week because you've given me permission to send a newsletter that just says I can't be bothered this week. If it doesn't matter that much to the receiver, then why are we so insistent that people stick to a send frequency?
So we discussed this a little bit earlier, and actually it was your point that I love. So I'm stealing this directly from you, Jamie. But you mentioned the impact that it had on the sender as being the main reason to make sure that you stay consistent. Do you want to share the third gym analogy for this episode?
Third gym analogy, yeah. You could have just stolen that.
Yeah, I was going to, and then I thought, you know what? No, you deserve the limelight.
I would like to say that I wouldn't have called you out live on the recording, but I probably would have done, and that would have been embarrassing. So I think the impact that not sticking to your send frequency has on the sender, not on the recipient. I think what I was talking about when we spoke about that before off air is that if we go back to the gym analogy again, apologies, if I miss a week in the gym, it doesn't impact my progress that much if I'm then going most weeks after that. The impact that it has on me, though, is that I'm more likely to not go in the following weeks. So it's less about the impact that missing 1 week has on your email marketing or when you go to the gym. It's more about the impact that it has on the likelihood that you're going to skip other weeks in the future. So it's a discipline thing. And so by missing a week, and actually I kind of like that. If we tie it back to the idea that I had about sending an email that's just kind of almost like a placeholder, kind of break the fourth wall email when you haven't got something to send that week. I quite like that because you still ticking that box and you're still kind of servicing that kind of discipline of getting something out that week, right? You're kind of doing it still. It's like my wife tells me when I very infrequently go to the gym, she's like, well, just go and just do something, and just to get your body moving. And then once you're down there, you'll probably end up doing something more anyway. So, gym analogy over, and I'm trying my best not to bring it up, but I think that's the biggest impact. It's on the sender, not necessarily on the recipient.
Yeah, and I think that's really nice. I think where people worry is not. People do worry about missing a newsletter, and that can be a legit fear. But in order to miss newsletters, you have to have already established a pretty regular cadence. So that's quite a nice position to have. If we're thinking about the listener who isn't yet running a newsletter or is sending a newsletter, once every 3.5 months, whenever they sort of remember, and they're sitting down and thinking to themselves, okay, I think I could do like a once a week newsletter, but I'm worried about pissing people off. I'm worried that I'm going to be a pest in their inbox. What do you say to them? How do you alleviate that concern?
Just don't be a pest. I think I think if you're pestering someone or if you're worried about how frequently you're sending, it's more to do with what you're sending than how often. Usually, I think I'm always tempted to go to the analogy route because I think that's how I like to think. But so I'll try not to. But I think it's if we think about people getting annoyed at what they're getting and receiving. It might be frequency, but I would challenge that. I would say that if the content was good enough and relevant enough, that it would be okay to send as frequently as you need to. I think it's when the content is shite that people get annoyed. And so I think that's what comes first. Look, don't get me wrong. If someone was sending me really, really great content and it was twice a day, that might be a bit much. So there is a limit to that, but I would challenge it. I would say the quality of the content is what will piss people off first.
That's a great point. And I think the reason why you would challenge even valuable content if it was too frequent is that ultimately you only have so much time in a day, right? Like you don't spend as much as you'd probably like to. You can't spend your whole day in your inbox reading newsletters that you've subscribed to. It's just not going to happen. And for the majority of B2B email lists, the people that are on those are going to be hardworking, in inverted commas, perhaps professionals who have a sea of emails that they need to get through on any given day, who have emails that will be incredibly urgent coming from, maybe their boss or their juniors, and around projects that they're working on, etc., things that they absolutely have to open and reply to. And so your email, however good it is always going to be peripheral to some extent. And it is always going to occupy the sort of the recreational side of the inbox, as opposed to the I absolutely must get to this before the end of the day, otherwise I'm toast.
Yeah. And people have a tolerance, right? And that's kind of what you're touching on there. People have a tolerance. And if we imagine for a second, maybe there's a lady sat in a bar, and a number of guys have come up to this lady in the bar and have tried chat up lines. Maybe it's 1, 2, 3, and then maybe with the fourth bloke. And maybe the fifth bloke has the most interesting thing to say and would be the greatest match for this lady at the bar. But because he's number 5, and because her tolerance and her patience is now so short that it doesn't matter what he says, her tolerance has run out. So it's also about the context of someone's day, not just the content either. When the people are getting pissed off. So, there are so many variables when we think about marketing as a whole, and specifically email marketing, because we're coming into an inbox And for a lot of people, an inbox is someone's to-do list in the B2B space. I'm judging how busy my day is based on how many emails I've got, or how far I am behind based on how many unread emails I've got in my inbox. So sometimes if I'm trying to get that number down and trying to catch up, there might be some great content I'll miss because I'll just mark it as read and then I'll move on. So I think that's also important to think about, and we have almost no control over that.
I just want to say for the listener that even though Jamie's last analogy was about a woman at a bar, he actually meant barbell, as in a bar that you'd find in a gym. It was also a gym analogy. So Jamie, I think what you've touched on there is something that probably deserves its very own episode, but I like how we sort of swapped roles, by the way, and I've become I'm enjoying being the one to ask the questions, put you on the spot. This is probably something that we ought to touch on properly, but I want to quickly touch on it here. Is there a best time of the day or best day of the week to send our emails, given what you've just said about how someone's day might be going in a B2B space?
Jesus Christ. I wish we hadn't swapped roles. I wish it was me that was asking you that question. Oh, God. I mean, if you Google this question, you'll get answers, right? And you'll get answers based on some kind of research that would have happened. I think the best research for finding out when the best day and time for you to send your email is the research that you conduct yourself, because no business is like you and no audience is like yours. So I would encourage everyone to do their own research on this. And look, email platforms make that incredibly easy to do. All you have to do is send it at a different time and then look at the metrics. There's no point sending 2 emails, one at one time, one at another time, and thinking that got it sussed either. We're talking about testing these things over months, over lots and lots of campaigns, and then identifying trends, because there are lots of anomalies. My feeling is, if you're in the B2B space, sending newsletters, it's got to be in the week. And for me, I like sending them mid-morning or mid-afternoon. You could talk yourself into any time of day being the best time of day, because you could be like, oh, well, people don't want them at 9 o'clock because that's when they first log on and they're trying to address their other stuff. Or people won't want them at 12 o'clock because they'll be out at lunch. Or, and you could talk about all these different reasons, but all of those reasons are just a hypothesis until you actually test it and find out what the results are telling you. You're writing and sending pretty much, well, most of the emails that we do for our clients. So you have the benefit of sending. I mean, we send dozens of newsletters every single month. And on top of that, dozens of campaigns that aren't necessarily newsletters. Is there a trend that you've identified, or at least some insight as to why you shouldn't just pick a time and because Google tells you and stick to it?
No, is the short answer. And that in and of itself is all the insight you need about why you shouldn't just Google this and sort of take that as gospel, because through all of the emails that we've ever sent, and it would be thousands since we started as an agency, we have never observed a categorical best or worst time to send a B2B newsletter. Now, what we have observed is a good time to send a newsletter for a particular list, but that doesn't necessarily translate to this other B2B business that we're running a newsletter for. And so, for example, to borrow an incredibly basic illustration, if you're sending an email to a PR audience, let's say that you run a PR consultancy or something, and so the people on your list are people who are responsible for PR, they're in-house PRs. You probably don't want to be sending that newsletter at 9 a.m. because most people in PR are reading newspapers and catching up on industry news every morning and having company briefings where they talk about what's happened overnight, etc. And their head is not going to be where you want it to be to read your newsletter and engage. So you probably want to be thinking about sending in the afternoon. So there are also industry considerations here. And I suppose the best thing to do if I was if I was listening to this and thinking, okay, well, this doesn't really help me because I'm not a PR consultancy and I still want to know, I would think very carefully, literally look at the people, look at the individuals on your list. Don't scroll through the whole lot, but have a look at, 10, 20. Think about them. Like, what do they do? What sort of businesses do they work at? What does their day look like? And start from there, because depending on your industry or the people on your list, if you're targeting CEOs, there might be a greater chance that they're reading emails outside of work hours than if you're targeting interns who are only part-time. So there's all kinds of considerations here.
I like that. I think what about setting or stating the time and day that you're going to send your email as part of the proposition for your newsletter? So, I mean, you could call it, there was a newsletter that I think I am still subscribed to it. I don't know if I've had one for very recently, so I should probably contact him and say, what's your send frequency doing? But it was something along the lines of like agency espresso. And so the idea of it was that it was in the morning before work started and it was very short. I quite like that idea. It's not enough to make a successful newsletter on its own, but making the send time part of the proposition. And I think you can only really do that if you know your audience properly.
Yes, absolutely. I think one of the most famous and widely known examples of this is Morning Brew, which is the same principle. And yeah, I really like that, because you're managing expectations, you're holding yourself accountable as well, and also it by selecting a time, like I can hear agency espresso, and okay, that's sent before the working day, and I can sort of start to build an idea of what kind of content that's going to be sending. I know, for example, that's not going to be an email that's going to take me half an hour to read. It's probably going to be quite concise, something that I can literally read whilst I'm sipping on my espressos. Are the little ones, aren't they? Like the shots.
Yeah.
And
it's just not a shot. I mean, it kind of is a shot, but it's not. Yeah, you don't drink it in a shot glass.
You don't slam it.
Yeah, you don't slam it. Yeah.
So I think it's a great way of framing the value that you're gonna give as well, and if nothing else, it's a way of sort of creating a bit of a brand around your newsletter. They're the morning guys.
And if nothing else aside, it also sounds like a Sabrina Carpenter song as well. Agency Espresso.
That's probably the best. Imagine that sounds like some sort of cringe cover that like agency founders do of a song like, what's the Agency Espresso?
Yeah.
And then it's really rubbish.
Yeah. Let's put that on the list for next year.
We should do it. Yeah.
Okay, let's do hot take. This episode's hot take presented to you by James and Jamie. I wish we had someone else here to introduce us.
We need like a hot sauce as a sponsor.
Yeah.
Like some, like sponsored the hot sauce, like brought to you by Sriracha sauce or something. I mean, that'd be very high profile.
Yeah. Let's work on that.
We could just pretend.
Get someone to sponsor hot take.
Coleman's mustard.
Yeah. Because we're Norwich based.
Yeah.
Coleman's, if you're listening, do you want to sponsor hot take?
They're not, mate. Don't worry.
Oh. Okay, this week's hot take. So I think this is going to be the easiest hot take ever. In fact, maybe it's one that we do together again.
No. You do yours.
Okay, fine.
I want to think about mine because I might go for something hipster.
Okay, fine. How often you're going to have the craft IPA of hot takes this week? It better be hoppy.
Hot takes.
Okay, how often should you send your newsletter? I think we've asked that question already, but let's do it succinctly in a very short kind of hot take. Minimum monthly, ideally weekly. That's my hot take. It's not even that hot. It's like a lukewarm take at this point.
I mean, it was hot when I said it at the start of the podcast, but it's cooled down since we didn't put it in the thermos.
I've got sloppy second take.
Okay, my hot take, I'll go for something a little bit edgy then, just so that I'm not repeating it. Mine is look at your audience, think about when they're... look at your audience and think about how often they want to hear from you.
Nice. Cool. I know how much that pained you to keep that succinct.
I
could see I could see the caveats and the Well done, mate. I'm proud of you. That was almost just one sentence. I think it was one sentence.
Yeah.
I'm going to click this button and hopefully it does this. That's who we are, the Inbox
Well
Club. If you don't have the benefit of seeing this if you're listening it on audio, but a little link pops up when I press a button and it makes you feel like a 5-star producer. But that's who we are. We're the Inbox Club. Website is www.theinbox.club. We're email marketers, if that's not already obvious. Is there anything else you want to say before we end this episode?
It'd be worrying if, having listened to this podcast, people were still unaware of the fact that we are email marketers.
I mean, we do have a penchant for chatting shit before we actually jump into the subject matter, but that's part of the charm, right? That's what we're saying.
Yeah. That's the MO.
It's the strategy. Cool. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.